Hello everyone, this is welldoing.org Zoom interview and we're doing it with Sian Williams. Hello Sian.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Now Sian is a former BBC newsreader and at the moment she's on Channel 5 doing 5 News at 5, is that right?
I am, that's
yes.
right, from my back bedroom.
Yes, all the way through COVID you've been doing it, yes, quite amazing.
Yeah.
But you're also a fully trained psychotherapist.
Yes, yeah. Well, and I'm doing a doctorate in psychology. So I started training in psychology about 10 years ago and first started learning more about trauma and how to cope with people in trauma and help them through trauma and look towards recovery and resilience. And then I got really interested in that. I did a master's in psychology, did some more external training around that as well. I've been seeing clients for the past few years, and I'm in the final year now of my doctorate in counselling psychology. And counselling psychology, as you know, is a protected term, and you have to sort of hit all the marks in order to do it. So, and I wanted that sort of intensity because I just felt so lacking, I guess, in knowledge or enough knowledge to be able to. It's such a big thing sitting in front of somebody and when they're asking for help, and it's such a huge responsibility. And the more learning I've done and the more training I've done and the more qualifications I get, the more I realize the more I need to know. So it's the more you know, the less you know kind of thing. But I've loved it, and I've been really privileged to work with some incredible people. So yeah.
And now you're working with the NHS, is that right?
I am. So I've started with the NHS. A lot of my family work with the NHS. So my son is a doctor. My brother works as a manager in the NHS. My mum was a nurse. My granny was a nurse. Her mother was a nurse. My grandfather was a doctor. So there was this assumption that I would go into the NHS from when I was little. And I wanted to be a journalist. My dad was a journalist, and I didn't like the sight of blood, and I just thought that's the place for me. So I worked towards journalism, and I'm lucky I've had a 35-year career in journalism, and I'm still doing it. But I always felt as though, I don't know, I sort of wanted to say to my mum, you know, I to reflect her caring attitude, I guess, and the things that I hope I've learnt and taken from her, and put them back somewhere. And the NHS has been so incredibly brilliant for me and my family, and I guess for so many of us, particularly during lockdown, that I needed to repay a debt, if that makes sense, Louise. Does that make sense? It felt as though I'm learning all these skills, and if I'm learning all these skills, then I really ought to be doing something with them for the broader, wider cause. And there seems to be no bigger cause at the moment than trying to help people through dark times when they've got struggle with their mental health. And patients in hospitals are right at the center of that. So I've started at the NHS, and I'm going to be working with some brilliant people and learning loads. So I'm looking forward to it. I had my first client yesterday, actually.
Oh, fantastic.
So I'm off, yeah. Except there's a blizzard, an absolute blizzard of documents. There are sort of 50 documents on the first day, and I phoned my brother and I said, what is this? And he said, welcome to the NHS.
So you're working in a hospital then, and so you'll be seeing people affected by physical health and its effect on their mental health. Is that the way it is, or is it actually a mental health unit?
Yeah, so I'm working in a psychology department of a large London teaching hospital, and so I will be delivering therapy to patients.
Yeah, fantastic. That's fantastic. Now, I know that about 4 years ago, you had an experience of cancer. Do you think that helped make your decision to start actually counselling people, being a counselling psychologist? Do you think that was part of what pushed you?
I'm not sure, if I'm honest with you, because I was already on that path. I think what I learnt experiencing cancer was the real value of psychology. And I was in an NHS hospital which offered psychological help to people experiencing cancer. And you often find that there's a bit of a sort of a cliff. You're on a cancer conveyor belt for a while, and you're surviving and you're surviving and you're surviving, and then you get to the end of the treatment when everything goes and the diary is empty and perhaps you're not well enough to work. This is my position. I appreciate everybody's very different, but I have noticed I'm doing some research with people with cancer at the moment, looking at self-criticism and self-compassion, and how to hold self-compassion when you've got cancer, because it's quite hard. You tend to do a lot of sort of beating yourself up. I should be better. I should be fighting. I should be, where am I in this battle? You're using those sort of very pejorative words, and the language which tends to be quite harsh and judgmental. So I thought that was interesting, and so I'm doing that as my doctoral research, and have been talking to a lot of people with cancer over COVID, which has been fascinating. But I think having had the experience and talking to somebody who said, this is normal, what you're experiencing is normal, because I got through all the sort of survival of the treatment, and then I had this sort of chasm of emotional upset, sadness, rage, all these sort of conflicting emotions that I just didn't know what to do with them, did not know what to do with them. And I felt as though I was almost visiting some of them on my family, which I'd protected them, I thought, for so long during the cancer. And when it got to the emotional stuff, suddenly the emotional stuff, in a way, for me, felt harder than the physical stuff to deal with. And I noticed that with a lot of people in trauma, actually, or have experienced some kind of trauma. I did some research for my master's way back when with journalists, and talking about, again, recovery after trauma. And one of the people I spoke to was a colleague who had his leg blown off in Iraq. And he was a producer for the BBC. And he said, I would have rather have lost my other leg than to have gone through the psychological pain that I went through with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Wow. And
that for me was just, it was this was before, there's no pecking order of trauma, right? There's no sort of, right, you're here and I'm done here. But when I went through my own experience of something difficult, I thought, I get that sort of, why can I cope with that and I can't cope with this? So I saw a psychologist who was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And she was the first person I could sit in front of and say, I feel rubbish. I feel rubbish, and I feel rubbish for feeling rubbish, and I should be feeling like that, but I should be feeling better, and I should be feeling stronger, and I should be going back to work. And she was hearing all these shoulds and saying that there's no room for shoulds here, you just. And she was all about self-compassion and what would you say to a friend, and just all her sort of invaluable wisdom, I guess, did perhaps make me think, right, get a move on, Sian. Perhaps that took me into the doctorate. I was already training. I'd been training for a while before then. But I think, yeah, perhaps you're right. I hadn't thought of it like that. Perhaps that was the thing that made me think, come on, now's the time. Now's the time to put some of that stuff that she helped you with back somewhere else, and hopefully to help other people.
And do you think you'll still be doing broadcasting as well? Will it be split between the two?
Well, I've never had a plan, in that sense. I don't know whether you've got friends who say, and I'm in the next 5 years, I'm going to be here, or, I look at my planner and it says this, and I think that's marvelous. But I've never been like that. I often feel as though I've sort of fallen into things. I fell into television presenting. I wasn't intending to be one, and then I stayed. Yeah, I don't really have a plan not to do broadcasting. And I think after 35 years, I'd like to be able to hold the two. I think if it's doable to do both and rather than either or, then certainly what I'd like to do. So I very much intend to continue broadcasting, and I'm lucky, you know, I'm 55 and I'm still in it, and I've had a great career and worked with some wonderful people. And if there is the ability to be able to continue to do that, then I'd like to do that. And I'd like to mix the two, obviously. I'd like to bring the two together and for there to be a bigger platform, I guess, for mental health broadcasting,
Yes.
bringing together thoughts and ideas and experts. And, you know, I do think that there's a real need for that out there
Yes.
at the moment. Yep.
We've had almost 6 months of the COVID situation in the UK and, of course, all around the world. I'd like to know how you see, as a psychologist, how you see, you know, British people responding. What do you think is happening?
Gosh, what do I think is happening? I think there are lots of things happening, and I think it's a very complex picture. I'm doing the news today, and I know that at the moment where we are, cases are rising among young people, and there are local lockdowns in Wales and in some parts of Scotland. I know there's a lot of fear. I know there's a lot of people still experiencing not just the immediacy of COVID, but also the long-term effects of having had COVID. And I'm sure you know people who've had it, who may still be experiencing that. I certainly do. We may have lost somebody to it. So I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety still there about COVID, and I wouldn't underestimate the challenges that face us. I also have noticed resilience and solidarity and strength, and I have been absolutely blown away by that. Just in my own community, suddenly groups were springing up to offer support to one another, to knock on doors and see if people needed help. And that kind of spirit, the spirit that got us all clapping on a Thursday night, that made us remember to thank people who perhaps we hadn't thanked before for doing the essential jobs that they do, for appreciating the value of family, for even when there are rows, which of course I've got 2 small children, and we were homeschooling them, and there were frequent misunderstandings and harsh words sometimes in our house, as there probably have been in many homes. But I am so grateful for the family I've got, and for where we live, and for having health. And so I guess what I've noticed is this very complex mix of emotions. But alongside the fear and anxiety and challenge, that there's also strength and resilience and gratitude. And in that, there is also growth. And those people, the experts and those who've spent a lifetime studying growth and resilience, like Professor Martin Seligman, will tell you that after the Second World War, there were predictions of 3 million mental health casualties. So they built psychiatric hospitals on the edge of London, 3 of them. And within a couple of months of the war ending, the hospitals had to be closed because there wasn't the outbreak of mental ill health that was expected. Now, again, that's not to underestimate trauma or invalidate trauma, but it is to say there is potential to recognize within ourselves, within our communities, within our families, the strength and the resilience that we have shown during this period, and to think, right, what bits of that do I want to take forward? Because I also think when I talk about resilience, a lot of people say it's about bouncing back, and I don't see it as bouncing back, because I don't think there is a back. I think where we are, it's a moving forward. It might be a spring forward, but it's not a bounce back. Let's not go back. Let's use what we've learned to move forward, and to move forward as stronger, more resilient human beings who are grateful, who recognize compassion for ourselves and for other people, and accepting compassion from others as well. That's a big thing. Quietening the harsh voice being a little kinder, all those things, hopefully all those things we can take forward when life gets back to whatever life gets back to, whatever happens next.